Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Speculation Station. My name is Captain Ketter. Today, we'll be talking about Worlds, its return, announced recently by AMG, some of our reactions to that, and what we think that holds for the future. So, today, I'm joined by Bodhi. Say hi, Bodhi.
Hi, everyone.
I'm also joined by Texas Honey Badger. Say hi.
Hello there.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about Worlds and the return of the Worlds Championship hosted by AMG. There was a period of mourning after their announcement a couple weeks ago about how the grand tournaments were going to be the highest level of play in the Armada community. Well, I say the Armada community, but that also includes the other games that they host, including Star Wars Legion, Star Wars X-Wing, and Marvel Crisis Protocol. Because of that announcement, most people came to the conclusion that there would be no worlds, and the worlds that we just recently had would be the last one, barring any intervention by the community to host their own worlds. So, in the last episode, I mentioned how the community needs to step up if Worlds is not going to be a thing, and come together and make something happen. Well, starting last week, AMG made the announcement that Worlds is back on, still at Adepticon, but at the new location. And the last 2 weeks have been a roller coaster of emotions for most people in each of these communities, including the Armada community. But as I mentioned in a previous episode, I believe it was episode 3, I talked a little bit about how AMG could pivot away from their decision with doing away with Worlds to having an open invite. And that's not so that I can boast about what great a visionary I am, but I thought it was a good business move for them to turn and create an open invite so they could go along the lines of their inclusive play environment. If you go back and listen to that episode, you can tell I'm not convinced by my own idea, and I'm mostly just throwing it out because I don't want the ending of Worlds to be true. And thankfully, it's not. I also don't think anyone at AMG or anyone related to anyone at AMG was really listening to my podcast or trying to take advice from what I have to say. But I also don't think the other scenario is true, where a lot of people in the community have been rejoicing recently, saying that Worlds is back and AMG has heard us and listened to us. I also don't think that is true. I really don't want to burst anyone's bubble or make anyone feel like our voices don't matter. They do. But I don't believe that's the case either. Based on their release schedule for their announcements, it seems much more likely to me that they're understaffed and these announcements are getting pushed out intermittently. It looks more to me that there is a bottleneck in their press releases, and overall, most of their announcements, I would say, are a bit sporadic. So, with that, I think the AMG as a company is a little bit understaffed, I would say, probably, especially given the current situation with how they have to tighten all of their financials in order to pay off this massive debt that Asmodee has taken on its shoulders from the Embracer Group. But all of this, I don't think is really a super negative thing for the world of Star Wars miniatures. It really is much more the same, and I think that the play environment at Worlds is going to be more fun on the first day and then more competitive on the second day. So, those are some of my thoughts. Overall, I think it's a good move by AMG, but I don't think it was a shift in their thinking or anything. I think it was just a delayed response that couldn't be helped due to understaffing. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that their move was the right move to make? Do you think it was on purpose?
Well, obviously, it was the right move to make. I think as much as it's cool to believe that the outrage from the community is the reason why Worlds is back, based off of what people have been saying in the Discord, I think the most likely solution or the reason is that Asmodee was just like, "Yo, you can't cancel this. This is one of our biggest PR events in the year." And they made AMG bring it back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not gonna say I told you so. I'll just say I informed you thusly that it's too soon. Whenever the first announcement came out, it was too soon to kind of jump up and get riled up and really think that the world was ending and all of that. And I get that people are passionate and all of those things, and they were mourning the loss of worlds, but it ended up working out in the end. I do agree with some of the important parts that were pointed out of now Worlds is open and you don't need a ticket to go. I think there were a lot of people that went to Worlds just because they got a ticket. And I think the ticket to Worlds also fueled some of these local events. I know I won my ticket to Worlds last year at the start of the season at LSO at a Worlds Open qualifier, and then I still traveled all over Texas and into Arkansas to help people reach their 16 limit to get as many Worlds invites out there to people that wanted them. And there was probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 tournaments where I was the 16th one, and it ended up not really needing to have 16 as we found out later, but that was still really cool to see other people that also embraced the community and embraced helping people get to the 16, especially after they won Worlds tickets and then kept going to store championships to help other people get Worlds tickets. So I don't think we're going to get as big of a turnout to Worlds next year as we did this year. And I don't think we're going to get as big of turnouts to regular events as we did. So I think that this last competitive season was kind of the highlight of a competitive season in Armada. I know that sounds bum. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but that's just where I think realistically we're headed. But again, Worlds is back. Huge positive. I hope I can go again this year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Like I know when I got my Worlds invite, I mean, that was the only reason that I went to Worlds. I've never traveled for any competitive game or and for any kind of major tournament before I got my invite. And the fact that I was willing to put myself in spend my money to go and travel for a game, that's because of the invite system. I wouldn't have done that otherwise. And just like you said with the store tournaments, one of my friends and I went to Oklahoma, which was like a 3-hour drive, just to try and get him an invite as well. And I just don't see that happening. I think that there's still going to be a pretty big turnout, but I think that the person who was in my shoes last year, who hadn't had the chance to see what Worlds was like, I don't think that person will continue to try as hard.
I can agree with that statement, or both of those statements to a degree, but I think that really what's going to happen is we're going to see a decrease in play mostly on the casual or store tournament level. I think the grand tournaments are going to, depending on what the prize support is, but also maybe not, you can only entice people so much to try and travel several hours or fly to go to a grand tournament. I think the invites were huge in last season, but this season I think that the grand tournaments and the store championships are going to see fewer players. I think we'll see some more consistency. There are some players that once they got their ticket, they just bowed out and never played again really in any other tournaments until Worlds came around. I saw that a little bit, but I think that contrary to your view, my perspective is that Worlds will be bigger next year. I think the other tournaments are going to be smaller, but I think Worlds is going to be bigger. And I think that because of a couple of reasons. One, I think the local players in that area, like Chicago and the Great White North, I think they will make the trip down to Worlds and they will not have a hindrance of, like, do I have an invite or not? And then I think that a lot of the US players will end up going. Like, when I say a lot, I mean out of the competitive scene, I would say maybe the top 10 to 15% from each community would go. Um, so I think that the numbers at Worlds will be bigger. But overall, I think the numbers are going to drop. And I would like to offer a solution to this. And I think in Texas, we already have the solution to this, and that is the circuit. So here in Texas, we have a circuit where we have 4 tournaments, one in each major city, one in San Antonio, Houston, Austin, and Dallas. And Texas Honey Badger over here is the reigning champion of last year's circuit. But I think that having circuits is something that brings competitive play down to a local level, or a more so local level. And I think that that mechanism is going to create better organized play, but right now it's not supported in the term or in the way that they're circuits. As grand tournaments or possibly store championships with the support of the kits from AMG, they can be supported, but currently the circuits aren't recognized. So I think if AMG wants to foster better and more inclusive play, I think that they need to take a shift away from the grand tournaments. I know I say this before. We've even had our first grand tournament. But I think that circuit play and then finishing the circuit with a grand tournament in the local area is the way to go in order to improve the communities locally. And that doesn't have to do just with Armada. I think that really should go for other games as well.
Yeah, I really like the circuit idea of where you're promoting certain events and then participation in those events helps you with placing in the circuit. It's kind of like what the world system was with the tickets. You went to store championships to get your ticket. And so you went and played and tried and get your ticket. And then once you got your ticket, okay, now I'm ready for Worlds. However, what I see happening is you don't need a ticket, so you don't go and play in store championships because you don't have to. Now, some people will want to and some people will enjoy, but people might have the full intention to go to Worlds and then Worlds rolls around and just life happened and they didn't go play in any store championships and they haven't played in 6 months and they're rusty and they're like, well, I'm not going to go to Worlds just to get my ass kicked. So they don't go. And the circuit system kind of solves that problem of some people are going to the events for the opportunity to play in, like, for instance here, the Texas Championship at the end of the year. And some people are just going because they're Armada events and they want to go and they're fun and see all their friends and everything. And some people go for both. But then when you get to the end and you're looking at the positioning of how many tournament points you have and how many tournament points you need, it kind of drives participation into those later events as well. But I also say all this and take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt because last season was my only experience with Armada. I didn't play Armada before that, so I don't have anything to compare it to. And I had my own roller coaster of fun, with the success I had at these various tournaments, and it was amazing. I don't think I'm going to be able to replicate that this year by any means.
Yeah, that is one thing we kind of collectively suffer from on this podcast is each of us has been in Armada for, I don't know, not very long compared to the other guys in the community because I started playing competitively just a couple years ago. Prior to that, I was in the Midwest where there was no playing Armada. I just had my friends to play with. And then I moved down to Arkansas where I met Downsize It. Shout out Ben from Downsize It. We started up the Osmo tournament series up in Fayetteville, Arkansas. If any of you guys are in that area, definitely go check it out.
Yeah, come say hi to me.
Yeah, Bodie's there. But yeah, my favorite thing about the tournament circuit is that you only take the top two tournament scores from your competition. So there may be 4 major tournaments in order to get into the finals, but you only really need to perform at 2 of them. So it gives you an opportunity to say, I really want to test out this competitive list in a scenario where I know I'm going to run against some really competitive stuff, but I get the opportunity to try it. I think that's huge now, especially with some of the invites going away. This is maybe the one positive that you have the opportunity to try competitive stuff in a field of competitive players and not have to worry about the outcome. Because last year, with the invites on the line at every tournament, at least here in Texas, almost every store championship, every store tournament, every major tournament here in Texas, all of them had invites on the line, and so you brought what you thought was best to win. But what is best to win sometimes is not always what is most fun to play, or most fun to play against. And so either you're bringing a fleet or you're facing an opponent that has a fleet that is top tier meta, and it doesn't feel great sometimes to play against. So I think it's possible that the enjoyment of Armada in the Texas community, I think, is going to go up in the next year with more diverse lists, people trying out new stuff, and the freedom to go to a tournament and have fun instead of always vying for a ticket or an invitation to Worlds.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to touch on the inexperience you talked about earlier, which I agree with you. You know, relatively all 3 of us are new. I think I might be the newest, or maybe Bodie's a little newer than I am.
Yeah, I think you got me beat by a couple of months. So I started in like August of 2022.
Okay. So yeah, you're like a month newer than I am. So, but I think that's a good thing. And I'm glad that you, Josh, decided to do this podcast because some of the other, and I'm not talking about anybody specifically, don't come at me. If you think this pertains to you, then look inward because it probably does. But I have nobody in mind when I'm saying this. However, when I've heard some of the more experienced and older Armada players talk, it seems like they're very set in their ways and they're very content with the way certain things are, and they don't want to rock the boat, and they don't want to try to improve the game because it's the best meta we've ever had. So, and some of those people I don't think always use their voice responsibly. They don't realize that they're huge influencers in the Armada community, but some of the things that they say, people might take to heart, and they're not necessarily as impactful as the people taking to heart would be. I don't can't think of any examples, and I probably wouldn't give one if I could, but if you're a newer player, I would take everything with a grain of salt. If someone tells you something's bad and you enjoy playing it and you're successful with it, do it and prove them wrong. Or if someone tells you, you need to do this or that for Armada, have your list set up a certain way, just do whatever you find enjoyable, because there are some things, like Royce from Wisconsin plays Piet. He made it to day 2 at Worlds with Piet, and everyone thinks Piet's bad, but he likes him, and he likes the challenge of making him work. So things like that, I think, do a disservice to newer players, and so I appreciate you elevating the voice of some newer players with fresh ideas and fresh perspectives.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that actually brings to mind kind of what I really enjoy about Armada is the fact that I can take something that other people don't think is good or isn't really viable, and then I can try and make it work. And that's where all my enjoyment comes from, really, in Armada. If you look at my lists, um, if you look at the lists I've flown at other tournaments, including at Worlds the year before last, uh, all of them have like something in them that's not really supposed to work. It's not meta. People would, if people saw my list, they would tell me, "This is kind of wild. You probably shouldn't take this. You should definitely take something else." So that's where I get all of my enjoyment, is putting something down on the table that people stand across from and they're a little dumbfounded, possibly, or just questioning like, why would this be in a list together? This doesn't make sense. Like, there's mechanics that work, but how are you going to make this happen? And then putting that together and then coming out with a win is one of the most rewarding things you can have in Armada, in my opinion. Not necessarily winning tournaments, but taking the pieces of Armada, putting them together in a way that's new, fresh, something you can, or just something you like, and then pulling off a win with that feels great.
I take a lot of pride in the fact that in a tournament, I've never played a mirror match. I just haven't played where we have the same archetype of fleet or same commanders or any of it. I play stuff that is a lot different than the meta, and maybe even kind of counter meta. Like if you look at Pizza Party and its success in Texas, if you look at maybe what I'm going to bring to TXO this weekend, it's definitely stuff that not a lot of people are playing. Even what I brought to Worlds, that wasn't my list or my idea. I stole that from somebody else and changed it up, but it was still nobody else at Worlds was flying 4 Peltas and a Venator. And I get the enjoyment of, like you said, it's nice to come away with a win when you're flying something it's the only list in the tournament. You're not, 50% of the Sloans out there, or 20% of the Agates out there, or whatever it is. You're flying something completely different.
I can't really say too much because I flew Akbar at Worlds, and I think he was the second most popular, or no, maybe he was the most popular Rebel commander. But in most of my games, and originally what I started to really enjoy about Armada is, I come from a background of Magic the Gathering, and in trading card games, there's a ton of customization that you can do to a list. And recently I spoke to someone who's very, very, very good at Armada, and we were kind of talking about how a lot of the times in this game, the competitive lists end up being really, really narrowed down. And it ends up being the same kinds of archetypes or the same kinds of squadrons that you see over and over, the same specific upgrades. And at the highest level, I think that that's usually the case because it's hard to differ from the best. And, why try and beat something like a ISD2 when it's just really, really good? But if you dial it down just a little bit, and even back to like a not the upmost echelon of competitive play, there's not much in this game that's not viable. Sure, there are some squadrons and upgrade cards that are pretty terrible, but you can make just about every ship chassis work. And you can pull off some pretty janky combos and things. and I really, really like that about this game.
Yeah, that's something that's a topic we can kind of branch off into. Um, Obviously, Drew, you've had a lot of success with the stuff you've put on the table, but Bodhi, what have you had the most fun flying?
Oh man, Trench is my favorite commander. I love being able to manipulate command tokens, and it's kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine where I can just send tokens from one ship to another and then turn them into dials and activate my squadrons and engineer and nav all in one turn. And I just really enjoy when you can get a ton of efficiency out of the tiniest things. I really enjoy squadron play, but not really just like, oh, here's a bunch of bombers. I really enjoy the kinds of interactions that you can have with your upgrades. Like Ruthless Strategist in particular is one of my favorite cards. Because you look at it at first when you're a new player, it's like, why would you want to damage your own squadrons? But then you start to improve at this game, and you realize that those little planks of one damage that can't be scattered are extremely strong. And so I really like to, have some tanky squadrons and Ruthless, or just a bunch of like overwhelming defense tokens with a lot of little attacks. Even if it's not MSU, if it's just a bunch of double dice bombers, I really enjoy that. And I also just like playing, I mean, just like you guys, playing things that people haven't seen on the table. I'm almost done with my quest to play every commander in the game. I just have Garm and Leia left, and I'm going to play Leia next week against Ben. He's going to record it, so you can watch that in like a week or two on Downsized's channel. It's a double pickle list. And then I have a very Honey Badger-esque Pelta list, except it's the Rebel Peltas. And so instead of Garminder, it's Garminder. And I've got B-Wings, and it's going to be something. And that will debut at the next local tournament on the 25th.
I'm sure that will be something.
It will, in fact, be something. I'm not expecting to win with it.
Yeah, I have had the most trouble making Garm work in a list, and it feels really strange because it feels like it should be good, but you end up with all the tokens you need on 2 rounds, and really it's going to be 3 rounds. So, in my view, you kind of take your tokens off the bat, use them all up, replenish them on a turn, use them all up again. So that's like turns. Use them up on 3, gain them on 4, go tokenless on 5, and get them back on 6. Or maybe boost it up 1 round if you're going to engage early. But
they're Peltas, they're not engaging early.
yeah, that's true. I haven't found a real good list where I can implement that, and it feels like it works really well. The best I can think of is anything with command 2 or above, because if you have command 1, it's almost useless. So they're really good on Schmidt's list, where he took Gunnery Team Garm, I think, and I don't remember if he won Worlds with that. See, I don't know my Armada history. I'm that new. But I think he took Akbar, Gunnery Team Potatoes, Assault Frigate Mark IIs.
I have no idea. That sounds pretty fun, though.
That's kind of where you get your best return for the price of the commander, is taking command 3 ships. But
For sure. I played against a Garm list at Worlds that was 2 potatoes and a big spall. And he made use of every single token. It was pretty fun.
how about you, Drew? Where have you found the most fun in the list you've played?
Pizza party.
Pizza Party. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. After I met Tater at Gen Con in 2022 at my first tournament, he kind of sent me an idea for it. And I think he was just kind of like joking around, and I started flying it when I first started playing a little bit, and then I had a lot of fun, and then I tried to branch out into some other stuff, and because I don't like to fly the same thing over and over. I find myself coming back to Gar, but I really try and fly all the factions as much as possible. And then I hadn't played it in about a year, and then I played against since I'm the only one that hasn't mentioned him so far, I'll go ahead and mention him. Ben, downsize it, at Warzone for a practice match, and he's like, "Oh man, you should play that. That's a really good list." And I was like, I'm rusty. I haven't played it in a while." And then I started playing it again, and it's just so much fun. I like large dice pools. I played. Uh, who was my commander the other day? I played like 7 CR90s, and it was kind of depressing because I only had uh, 3 red dice and 2 blue dice on the table in case I needed to con fire something in. Um, I played Organa,
Who's your commander?
Leia, uh, and I was like, man, I'm gonna play this whole game and not need to use more than 5 dice total ever. Um, but no, I like big dice pools. I'm surprised I haven't really tried out the SSD yet, but so maybe the SSD eventually one of these days. We'll see.
I have a special place in my heart for disdain for the SSD after I went up against it for my my youth in Armada. My youth time was spent getting completely slapped by the SSD on like across the table from me.
Oh yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, you live and you learn, and then you play better.
We try to anyway.
For me, the most fun I've had in Armada was in a list has been my Kirsta Pickle list. I usually take a Nebulon with it. So whenever I saw the worlds list, it kind of reminded me of that. But the Kirsta Pickle is not as survivable as the Starhawk. But my favorite aspect of it was putting engine techs on the pickle because people wouldn't expect the pickle to jump up to speed 3 or maneuver the way it could with an engine techs move. So that was my onager counter for a while was I'm going to set up directly across from an onager with a pickle at speed, I'll say speed 1 to begin with, bank and nav, take a shot, or tank a shot, excuse me, from extreme range with an evade, and then go speed 3, and then just be in the nose of an onager. And then by turn 4, I could be either out of the arc or I would have killed the onager. So that one always felt really good when I boosted myself like a rocket straight into the nose of one of those guys.
Nice.
All right, well, we can circle back to the idea the idea of worlds after we've gone off on this little tangent. So I'll just wrap up my thoughts here. I think worlds is going to be we're going to see more players at worlds. It's going to be more inclusive, like they want it to be at AMG. I think the day one is going to be what's going to see more casual type play, as in the skill level competitively is going to be a little bit lower. But I think that also has the potential to knock people out if they're bringing a competitive list and come across something that's just a hard counter. Which there is a tendency for that to happen in Armada. The matchup luck is a big deal. And then day 2 is going to kind of return to competitive play. We're going to see some good competitive play from there on. And I think that overall play in Armada is going to see a decrease because of their choice to make it an open invite without the invitations out there driving people to go to store tournaments. I think that we're going to see less activity, but I think that can be fixed with the circuits. And I think that if you're in an area where there isn't a circuit, aka outside of Texas, I think you should talk to the community leaders and try and set up at least 3 tournaments to make a circuit out of, but probably 4, like we have. 4, I think, is like the prime number, so to speak, number of tournaments that should be included for a circuit. And then if you can make a grand tournament one of your final tournaments or included in the circuit. I think you played last year, but I'm pretty sure we have an invitation, right, for the Texas Championship?
Yes. So the way it works is last year there were 4 events. There was Texas Open, Texas Open Part 2, Warzone, and LSO. And you calculate your tournament points from the 2 highest events. And so they're based on 4-round events. If the event that you went to was only a 3-rounder, then it's you get an additional, like it's adjusted basically for as if it was a 4-round event. So you get an extra third of your points for your top score. And then the top 8 people are invited to the Texas Championship. Now last year, the reigning Texas champ, Jason, wasn't able to make it out to any of the circuit events, so he automatically got an invitation to defend his title, and so that made it 9. So then they bumped it up to 10, so 9 people got invited to challenge Jason for his title. And so that's the way it works. They're kind of doing something similar in the Galactic Tacticians League, where everyone competes, and then at the end they'll take the average of your TP if you've done at least 3 events. But I like just doing the 2 highest because I went to TXO and I tied for first. I ended up getting second from MLV, so I had 28 TP from that event, and then or 29, I don't remember. And then we went to LSO, which was a world qualifier, and I got 4th. But I was number 1 on day 1, and that's when they took the TP for. So I basically, after those 2 events, secured my spot in the Texas Championship. Now, the reason I like doing the top 2 is because then for Warzone, I flew like a Rebel MSU list that is not something I'm good at all. And for another tournament, I flew like Imperial Squadrons or something, or maybe it was droids, I don't remember. But since I already got my spot, it allowed me to kind of play other lists and not have to worry about losing my invite, like I would have been if they said, hey, we're just going to take the average of all 4 events if you can go to at least 3 or at least 2 or something like that. So I like the being able to drop your lowest if you attend, and that again increases participation at your events. If you've got a low TP and it's your highest 2, then go to that 3rd event or that 4th event to try and beat your TP from a previous event.
I believe it's top. They take your top 2 scores, right?
Yes, it's 4 events, your top 2 scores. So that's what I was saying.
Okay.
By the time TXO and LSO were over, that was the other one on Texas Open Online. What I've been calling TXO Part 2 to not throw out the online thing, but it's out there now. I flew like 2 Kuats and an Onager, and just got wrecked because I didn't care. I already had it. So it was just a fun, beefy list. That was a lot of fun to play.
See, that's what I want to see in Armada is a lot of fun stuff going around. I think that I love competitive play. And I think to a degree competitive play got me into Armada deeper, or got me more deeply into Armada. But having fun with playing the game, I think, is really what just got me hooked on the game. Do you guys have any thoughts about Worlds as we wrap up? Anything you guys want to add?
I was just gonna say I don't. I think we pretty much covered it all. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for anyone who has been thinking, like, I'll go to the next world, I think that we should all try and do that. If your schedules and financial means will allow it, it might not be as exciting. Like, I know I was kind of like, do I even want to go? Because there won't be an invite forcing me to go. But if at all possible, I will be there. And I think as many of us should try and do that too. I think that's going to really just, use the chance that we have to make friends, meet the people that you've been playing online with if you've been playing online, and just use this opportunity because it's not clear if we'll have it again.
There is always that chance, I suppose. Well, wrapping this up, let's head over to the what is it?
The excavation
Wrapping this
section.
up. Yeah, I was gonna say excavation section. What is wrong with me? All right. Well, now at the end of our podcast, every podcast, we go to the elevation section. This section is an aspect of the podcast where we try to elevate one part of the game in order to make the game more fun, more enjoyable, or to make the game overall better. So, Drew, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I would like to propose elevating objectives and the bidding system, honestly. I think maybe bidding should be capped. Maybe if anything 10 points or over, you just roll off. I think that would encourage or discourage people from taking these massive farming lists where they have to be first or they have to be second. I think that would encourage more well-rounded lists being played if you cap it at 5 or 10 points, because if it's a cap at 5 points, if someone else has a 5-point bid as well, then it doesn't matter if you have a 20-point bid. Y'all are still going to go to dice. So I think that would shake things up. And as far as the objectives go, I would like for them to be more dedicated to their color assignments: assault, defense, navigation. I think the only quote unquote farming objectives, the passive farming objectives, should be yellow, the defense, like contested outpost or abandoned mining facility, or the way you farm asteroids and volatile deposits. Now, the only assault type objective should be red. So volatile deposits should either be a yellow or a red. It definitely shouldn't be a blue, because you get a crit bonus effect. Things like abandoned mining facility should lose its Purgle aspect, because those should be blue. Anything that is dealing with navigation or obstacles, like Rift Ambush, should be blue. There's a lot of, like, superior positions is fine where it is. Solar Corona is fine where it is. Precision Strike, Most Wanted, Opening Salvo, those are all great red objectives, but I think they shouldn't. There are obviously some objectives that are clearly better than others, and there are some objectives that are much worse than others and never get played. And so you can look at someone's list and think, okay, they probably have, these objectives. And I don't necessarily like that aspect. I think that we should work toward more well-rounded games, well-rounded lists, because if you have to take a list that can either assault or defend or navigate, and you don't know which one your opponent's going to pick, then good luck. Build a good list for it. But I think that would also play to the strength of first. I think right now second player is a little too strong in the game, and I think we need to elevate first player just a little bit. And that's how I would do it.
Yeah, there has often been this conversation of first player is too strong, second player is too strong. I think that had to do a lot with the releases that came out for Armada as they came out. So the Onager kind of boosted first player, honestly, because you could shoot across the board before they even got to you. So you became automatically a super aggressive player, or you could just turtle in the back and shoot them as they come in. So it kind of boosted both first and second player, I guess, to some degree. But the release of Old Governor Price, I think, was a clear first player card, and an area where the meta was overly, what is the word? I think that time when Price was released was where the first player had a significant advantage, especially Empire, over any other player. And so Armada kind of goes through waves of being a first player advantage meta or second player advantage meta. But Bodhi, what is your elevation?
Well, just real quick, I think that you're right. I think that there have been times where first player is really strong, but I honestly think that now is one of those times. I think that, well, obviously the best answer is to have a flexible list that has a pretty low bid and can play first or second player. That way you have more points of your list actually in the list, and you're comfortable enough to play, your opponent's objectives if you need to. You're comfortable enough as first player when you are. But really, like, when I have the bid, unless I've specifically built my list around the objectives, nowadays I'm picking first almost 100% of the time. Not just because I value being able to attack my opponent, but I really value being able to get out of arc as the first activation. And a lot of the times when I'm playing as second player, and I know that one of my ships is just going to blow up and there's not much that I can do about it because they're going to activate first, that can be something that, not really frustrating experience, but it's not favorable, obviously. So I oftentimes find myself wanting first player. As for what I'd like to elevate the Acclamator, which is Drew's favorite ship in the entire game. I think that for what they're trying to do, which is like this weird, like pseudo carrier assault ship thing, they don't do it that well. I think mediums are pretty niche in Armada anyway. And if you look at the mediums that are strong, it's because they do something incredibly well. Like the Quasars are really good carriers for their price, and the Assault Frigate throws a lot of red dice and is pretty efficient with a defensive retrofit. And the Munificents are just very tanky. But really, like, I think that Armada kind of favors either having a large or having multiple smalls. And in a world where that's the case, I don't think that the Acclamators really do much of anything. And I think, they were historically troop transports. That's what they were, used for. You see it in episode 2, all of the clones loading up into Acclamators. And so I think that they should have a special boarding team title. And I think that they should be able to... I'm not sure what this title would do, but I think that it should be just for Acclamators and do something to have to do with their troop carrying.
That's an interesting thought. I kind of am envisioning a title where it says you can gain like the 2 upgrades that give you the boarding teams, but you have to use a boarding team.
Yeah, that would be really cool, actually.
And then it wouldn't add in too many points to the list. Excuse me. I do think Acclamators need to be elevated. They're not very competitive. I don't think I've only seen one competitive list that I felt like had had a chance. That was my buddy Sir Chicken or Remotion. He has an Acclamator list that is a lot of fun for him to fly. Kind of hurts to fly against. I think he flew it last year at one tournament, but yeah, that's a good idea. I do want to tack on Drew's comment, I think both of us were kind of like being contrarians when we were talking about his comment. But I think Bodhi and I can both agree that objectives do need to see some elevation in order to liven up the gameplay in Armada, because going against a second player defensively, sometimes if that's all it's doing at a tournament, it's just kind of drains some of the fun out of playing, especially if you encounter that multiple times.
Yeah, I agree. And first player is incredibly strong. The ability to activate something before it gets killed, to repair, first player position is incredibly strong. What I mean by I think second player has the advantage is when you see lists with huge bids, 10 plus points, way more often than not, they're bidding for second player. And I think that's because that's what their list is designed to do. And so I think first player is stronger, but I think second player is more exploitable. And I agree, Bodhi. The Acclimator is complete trash. It's an awful ship. It dies way too easy. It has a decent punch, but horrible nav chart. It's the worst nav chart in the game. It's awful.
Yeah, I think the nav chart is just completely unnecessary. Like when you look at it, it's not a large ship. It's kind of the same thing they did to the Victory, where the Victory's got a terrible nav chart, but you have to kind of look at it and want to ask yourself why. For the Victory, I thought it was because, okay, this is like expansion 0, right? So this is like the beginning of the game. They don't know any better. They gave it a terrible nav chart. It's because of that. It's kind of one of the least taken ships in the game. But then they come out with the Acclimator. And this is all under FFG, so like this is all the same company developing all this stuff. They come out with the Acclimator, and it's almost as bad. I think it's better than the Victory, but I think it's in the same vein, almost untakeable for a competitive list because of the nav chart. If you give it an evade, I think that might make it too strong. I don't know. The evade with the salvo, I think that puts it above for its points where the Assault Frigate Mark II is. So I don't have a good answer, but I do like, Bodhi, your suggestion of the title. I think that's kind of cool. I think you also kind of have to expect that whatever you put on that ship, you're going to lose all those points, right? So, because it's going to become a target pretty fast. Okay. So to wrap up, my elevation for this week is generic officers. So I don't think I've spoken on this. I need to kind of make a list of all of our elevations so we don't double back on them. But generic officers really do not get taken at all. Besides expert shield tech, intel officer, and skilled first officer, there's a plethora of other generic officers. Sometimes you see flight commander, but it's much more rare. Usually you just see it on Yavaris. So to fix this and to elevate the game and to make other officers competitive, I think that there should be a mechanism where you can take 2 generic officers. But if you take a named officer, then you can only take 1. So for a lot of ships, this really doesn't change anything. If you have a defensive build, it can help you a little bit. If you have an offensive build, you run into a little bit of trouble where you have the intel officer and something else. Maybe there's a point cap, so anything above 5 points, anything above 5 points, you can only take 1. But I do think that this is an aspect of the game that, like, these officers don't get to see any play. I think that they need to be revisited, and I think that this could be an opportunity to try and incorporate them into the game. Not because we miss them. But I think that some of these abilities are stuff that can be very useful, but they almost never outweigh the benefits you can get from a named officer.
Well, I think part of that, it might just be because a lot of the generic officers were designed in a world where people were not very good at Armada, and a lot of them will let you change dials, and so they can help the newer player who's not quite as proficient with planning their command stack. But because so many of them are just like failure, or not failure, but I guess they're like idiot proofing. I don't see a world where an experienced player is really going to need those effects. And the ones that you listed off are the ones that don't have those effects because they actually contribute something to the game.
Yeah, I can see that. But I think that in order to make them viable, I think they need to see a points decrease. Like when I speak about this, I'm also talking about reworking them in some way. But the defense liaison I'm looking at right now, it's 3 points. You have to spend a command token to change your dial. And that and what's the other one? There's another liaison, isn't there? Weapons liaison, yeah. So you have to pay what in Armada is kind of an exorbitant cost in order to change your dial. And I think it's not worth it. I think if you change their points cost to just 1 point, then I think they're viable or something that can be taken.
I mean, I can get behind a buff of bad cards any day. That's more just like I don't see a world specifically where I would want 2 liaisons.
Yeah. What I think about when I am looking at like this, I'm thinking about Chart Officer. Chart Officer is a great card, but you'll never put it on a competitive list unless you just don't have anything else to put there. Chart Officer gives you the ability to trample over some obstacle, and then continue on. I think that Chart Officer has a place in a list where it's like an MC80 Liberty, where the turning is not very good, an Acclimator, but I mean, really, there aren't very many good officers in the Republic that you're going to want to put on there. But if you have the opportunity to put on 2 unnamed for an Acclimator, I think Intel Officer and Chart Officer. Well, I just broke my own rule, but maybe Skilled First Officer and Chart Officer. You're not spending that much. Both of those abilities are going to be discarded, and it takes the ship from being a terrible maneuvering ship to where you don't really care about maneuvering that much. And then you have the opportunity to do something else. That's kind of where this idea, the inception of this idea came from.
That makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. I want to give a brief shout out. I'm trying to do a shout out each week to a different content creator in Armada. This week I'm going to shout out, what's it called? Cannot Get Your Ship Out, the blog. So if you go online to cannotgetyourship.blogspot.com, you can look at a lot of articles written by community members in Armada, and you can find breakdowns of many different ships, upgrades, and squadrons within the game and learn how to play the game better.
Their attack sequence and you article is the best piece of media relating to Star Wars Armada to ever exist.
What's it called?
The attack sequence and you. It's all about the weird timing windows of like critical effects and how damage is dealt and when you actually get to do your modifications, and it has answered so many questions. It's very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, whenever I'm looking at a ship and I haven't flown it before, sometimes I'll go over here and see what they have to say. Usually they do a very thorough review of the ship, what upgrades usually go best on it, how to fly it, and what you should watch out for when you're flying it. So I highly recommend going over there and checking them out. While you're here, though, if you can leave us a like subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and if you guys have any comments, you can find me on Discord in the Armada Hub. My name is Captain Ketter. So with that, thank you for listening. I hope you all have an excellent start to your summer.